Tonight, I will be telling some true horror stories from around the internet. Stories of stalkers, break-ins, and more. These are real encounters involving real people, so this is a fair warning that these topics could be triggering to some. If you have a story you'd like to have shared with the channel, it can be submitted to reddit.com/r/slumberreads. Stay safe out there, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I'm a security guard for an alarm response company. My answer alarms for businesses and private residences. 99% of the time it's a motion detector set off by a cat, or a restaurant forgot to disarm their stuff before the stock truck arrived to unload. In this case, I was called out to a house where the back door alarm was set off. Like it, thought someone opened it. The owner was out of town, but she was alerted by her app and had her mother meet me there. We checked the door. It's locked. We figure maybe someone tried the door, but it didn't budge, setting off the alarm. But there's a light on inside. The mom mentioned this to the daughter on the phone. Daughter says she isn't sure if she left the light on or not. It's a good idea to make people think someone's home, but she just isn't sure. That gave me a bad tingle. The mother wanted to go inside to check. However, she didn't have a spare key. The neighbor did, but they were asleep and Mom didn't want to wake them. So, I fill out my papers and go back to my normal patrol routes. An hour later, the same home sends an alert out. I'm the only one in my city zone, so I answer it again. When I pull up, police and CSI are there talking to the mother and the now awake neighbor. They are reviewing video footage sent to them by the daughter. I look at the footage. 4 armed men wearing masks and hoodies came out of the bedroom a minute after the mother and I left. They proceeded to rob the place. They had broken in and locked the door behind them for appearances. They're the ones who turned on the light. The mother told me 3 guys had robbed her daughter's home a month before. Somehow they knew when this girl would be out of town. They appeared smart, desiring a quiet robbery without conflict. But they brought guns, so they were prepared to shoot their way out of trouble if need be. The mother had wanted to go in. If she'd had a key, or woken the neighbor for the key, we would likely have been shot dead by these guys when we went inside. Work doesn't give me Kevlar vests or anything. If I ever get another house call and someone is there, I am not going inside no matter what is asked of me. I count myself fortunate the way was blocked this time, because I was prepared to foolishly go in and check if I could. 1% of the calls where something is actually off. It has never been as bad as this one. When I was 19, I was a Marine and had stupidly used my military perks to get a home loan and bought my first house. I moved a barracks room worth of stuff into this place that seemed to me like a palace. Of course, I went out and bought some bar stools, a futon to sleep on until I got a bed, and some used coffee tables for my TV. I also had my dog with me. I was unpacking my meager belongings in the living room when I noticed a car had pulled into my driveway and blocked me in. I walked out and there stood a man offering to sell me a home security system. The man was dressed in khakis and a polo with a name tag that I can't recall, and the car didn't have a logo on it. It should have been a red flag for me, but I figured that some people on the job didn't drive company vehicles. He gave me his card. I don't even remember the company he told me he was with, to be honest. Cue the friendly salesman, giving me his pitch about needing a system and all of the perks that would come with being able to watch the exterior of my house at any time. As a low-ranking military member, I knew I couldn't afford yet another thing, so my mind was working to try to get this man to go away. I even consider ninja chopping him or whatever it is that we Marines do in Hand to Hand, just to get him to leave. But I'm sort of a passive person. I'm too nice. No, let's call it polite. I won't be rude to someone doing their job. I've been in customer service. I can relate. I tried politely declining his offer after he had tried to show me some stuff on his iPad, but you know how persistent these type can be. I'll admit to my own stupidity when answering his questions, like giving out too much information. Do you live alone? No, I live here with my wife and our 3 large dogs. At least I added in the large part. Her and her dogs hadn't actually moved in yet, and hers were just fat, though they were more vicious than my own good boy. But 2 women living together probably seemed like easier targets. I also mentioned being a Marine when he asked. He had seemed a bit shocked, but wouldn't be deterred. What kind of security system do you have? My dogs and me. Not the best answer I could have given. I wasn't exactly intimidating. I mean, I would be terrifying if I had a gun or something. I've been using them all my life and I've never missed a target, alive or inanimate. If you would invite me in, I can show you the best places to set up cameras. He mentioned more than a few times. Each time made me more and more creeped out, thinking that he was wanting to potentially rob me. Not that there was much to take. Despite being a sexual assault victim, all I could consider was a possible burglary, and made sure we stayed away from my house while we talked. We were outside for about 15 minutes total, me spending most of that time trying to politely get away from him and retreat inside. I wound up at my wit's end with social niceties and just walked away, leaving him standing alone in my front yard. I walked into my house and locked the door. He got into his car and left. I thought nothing more of it. After some unpacking, I couldn't do much. I had nowhere to put most of it. I ate some junk food and put together the futon. I got it all decked out with my fluffiest blankets, made sure the doors and windows were locked, and went to lay down in the living room. Looking back, I'm not sure why I didn't put it in the bedroom. They all have blinds and the rooms take a bit of getting to. Perhaps I wanted to be near an exit. For some context, my back door is a double glass pane door. At the time, I didn't have curtains on it, but I did have blinds on the kitchen window. My kitchen, living room, and dining room are all connected, but there's a wall in the living room that I strategically situated my futon against so it couldn't be seen by the back doors, or the front door window. Call me paranoid. I'd been laying down for a few hours, and at about 11, my dog got off of the futon and went to the back doors. My dog is large, and looks like a Rottweiler in coloring. He's a coonhound mix, but I guess city people don't have hunting dogs. But he's never hurt anything in his life. He'll greet strangers at the door with a tail wag and hardly barks. He stood back there for a bit and whined a few times. I ignored him. It was probably a squirrel. But then he started growling, a sound that I'll never forget. It sent terror straight through me as I sat alone in the dark. I'd only ever felt that fear once, when a mountain lion screamed and I realized I was powerless against nature. That's a story for a different thread. The point is, these sounds are designed to scare you, and it petrified me. I was frozen and wanted to wimp out, to hide, to call the cops, but I realized if someone was out there, they'd for sure see my phone lights and know where I was. So while my dog stayed stationed at the back door, I talked myself up just enough to move off the couch and investigate, still scared out of my mind. I slunk to the kitchen and grabbed a kitchen knife, one of the only utensils I had. Thanks, Ma. And crept to the kitchen window. I was squatted amongst the cabinets so that I couldn't be seen from any windows, bouncing a little, trying to gear up to peel back the blinds. My brain was telling me irrational things, horror stories that I had read come to life. To be real, I was ready to bitch out. I'm not a brave person. I was in communications for shit's sake, pretty far from any life-threatening situation. Well, not one that involves people at my fucking house. In my one safe fucking place. My hideout. My protection from anything outside wanting in. I've always been afraid of home invasion. It stems from an incident when I was younger that isn't really worth mentioning further. Point is, if someone dares enter my safe place, it's not safe anymore. I thought I couldn't get more scared in that moment. But then I saw a male figure in my backyard and my heart jumped. He wasn't very far from the window I was looking out of. He was bold enough to not wear anything over his head, and I saw the blonde hair in the moonlight. It only took me a few seconds to recognize the security salesman in the dark. He was on the edge of my porch, watching my back door, watching my dog. I jumped up quickly, climbed over the bar counter, and turned on the lights as I went towards the back door to let my still-growing dog out in hopes that he'd at least get rid of the man, if not injure him. No dice. As soon as the lights came on, he had just enough time to go jump the low part of the fence to safety before my dog even got off the porch. I didn't sleep that night. My dog sat on the futon with me, calm as could be, having done his job. The next morning I filed a police report, but I couldn't tell them his name or what company he was with, having lost the card he gave me. They sent some patrols through the area and I found out that all legit salesmen should have an ID upon request. That night I had 2 friends stay with me, ready for him to come back to either A, try to rob me or commit more nefarious acts, or B, try to scare me into home security. He didn't come back, and I haven't seen him since. My dog hasn't growled like that since either, but I'm terrified for the next time I hear it. This happened literally a month ago, back in February, when my boyfriend and I had decided to try out an open relationship for a little while for various reasons. We live separately in one of the larger cities in the north of Middle America, and there's a decently sized population of college students, like me, to keep the gay community fresh. So I was doing pretty well for myself. One night I was bored and scrolling through Grindr, looking for an easy hookup when I got a message from a guy who was barely 800 feet away. He wasn't terrible looking, and I was a little desperate, so I agreed to go to his place. He lives, quite literally, down the street from me. I can see his building from my window, so I walked over, and he let me up and into his apartment. We made small talk, and I mentioned where I lived. Hell, I even pointed out my window from one of the windows in the stairwell. From the first, I thought there was something off about the guy. Not necessarily bad, just different. An odd twitch in his hands when he gripped the banister, the vacancy of his eyes when he smiled. I'm not so cliché as to say he felt evil or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly surprised that, after we got to his apartment, the first thing he did was to tell his very pretty and friendly cat to say hello, and the second he did was walk over to the kitchen counter, grab a needle, and shoot up. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. I stood there, staring, and he turned around, dropped the needle on the counter, and went, "Oh shit, man. Shoulda asked. You cool with that?" I'm not a good Christian boy. I have broken into a church while tripping on LSD. I had sex on a headstone back in high school. But I have my standards, so I shook my head mutely, pulled my hat back on, and opened the door to leave. The guy rushed over and put a hand on my shoulder. Yo, I'm sorry. You don't gotta go. We don't gotta fuck. Do you want to watch Transformers 3 with me or something? Nope, I said bluntly, hustling away down the stairs. I bundled up my scarf against the early February chill and hurried back down the street to my apartment. He followed me downstairs, barefoot, in pajama pants and a t-shirt, until I stepped outside into the whipping winds. I turned back briefly to look after a moment, and he was still standing there in the doorway, watching me. I didn't have any premonitions of doom or weirdness. I grew up in Missouri. Junkies barely register as odd to me by this point. So I went home and went to bed. Now, you might have guessed it, but I'd never seen this dude around the neighborhood before. Truthfully, I hadn't seen most of my neighbors because my neighborhood is an odd mixture of white-collar suburbia, college housing, and low-income housing like my paramour's building, all on one street. So it didn't really register when I started seeing him more. I would leave for work in the afternoon, and he'd be on the other avenue across from my building strolling along. Or he'd cut across my building's parking lot like all the kids in the neighborhood did. A couple times I saw him walking across the campus mall. My apartment building is directly adjacent to my campus, but he'd always swerve to avoid me. Once or twice I'd notice him in the grocery store I work at as a barista, but it's the only one within walking distance, and he mentioned he didn't have a car. This went on for the entire month of February. Eventually, I started noticing he'd always be walking down the street opposite my building when I left for work at my usual time, and he was only ever at the store when I was working. He'd never approach the coffee stand within the store, where I work, but he'd look at me. A couple times I noticed him enter, look at me, pretend to shop, and leave without buying anything. I was starting to feel creeped out, but he hadn't done anything yet to make me feel particularly unsafe. One day, late February, I worked an early shift. When I got off, I was feeling a little crazy from lack of sleep, and I reached my place about 20 minutes before I usually leave for work. And on the corner of the sidewalk opposite me was the guy. He was checking his watch over and over and looking up. I did a bit of brilliant deductive analysis and followed his gaze up to my living room window. Then I looked back down at him. He looked right at me. There was a moment of tension as we stared each other in the eyes. Like I said, this dude didn't give off any evil or dark vibes. I've met people that do. No, what I saw in this guy's eyes, in his face, was much more human and much scarier. Desperation, loneliness, pain, and anger. He hurried after me, but I'm 6'3" and a former sprinter, whereas he was a 5'8" junkie wearing flip-flops on ice. I made it to the first set of doors to my apartment, scanned myself in through the second, and locked them behind me. He walked through the unlocked first set, tried to open the second, tried pushing the handicap button to open them, and then gave up. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he shouted, laying a hand on the glass of the door. "Can we talk about it?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Leave me alone." Then I whirled on my heel and stomped over to the elevator. When I turned back, he was gone out into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple weeks afterward, which is nice, because my boyfriend likes to walk down the street past the dude's apartment when he stays over and needs to go smoke. One night, my boyfriend was over at my place. He'd just gone out to smoke before we went to bed, and he mentioned that he wanted me to come with him the next time he went out. "Why?" I asked, pulling him in close to me while he shivered. "It's dark and cold, and I get paranoid out there sometimes," he mumbled into my chest. "There's this creepy dude that sometimes stands on the corner across the way and just stares at the building. One time he asked me for a cig, and I told him I didn't have one, when I had one literally in my hand." He laughed, kissed my chin, and passed out. I laid there awake, troubled. When I was sure my boyfriend was deeply asleep, meaning after about 5 minutes had passed, I extricated myself and went to the window. It was a cold, clear night. I could see across the street. Under the orange glow of the streetlight was the guy. I couldn't make him out clearly, but when he saw me, he waved. I flicked him off and closed the blinds. I didn't feel like I should tell my boyfriend because he was either gonna immediately go to the police, which I hate doing, or he'd try and defend me. And while I love him with my entire heart, I don't want to watch a fight between a junkie stalker and my underweight, nicotine-addicted boyfriend. So I kept it to myself and still haven't told him. But I did start accompanying him when he went out to smoke. The guy was usually outside. Sometimes he'd follow us for a bit before ducking away down a side street. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance. Sometimes he'd be up in his apartment. My boyfriend never noticed. I kept my composure and nothing happened. One night, though, we went out so my boyfriend could smoke, like normal. When we'd reached the end of the street and turned around, the stalker was behind us, about 50 feet back. I turned my head to check, and there he was. He waved at me again, and something told me I had to get back inside. "Hey, babe," I said quietly to my boyfriend. "Let's get back inside, yeah? I'm cold." "Oh, baby," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Okay, I'm almost done anyway." We walked back to the apartment building, and without turning, I knew that the stalker was behind us the entire time. I kept my hand intertwined with my boyfriend's and kept up the casual conversation we'd been having about how I hate geese. We got back up to my apartment and he got changed for bed while I grabbed some water. So I've never lived in an apartment before, and I don't know if it's odd or not, but this building has a wired telephone in each unit that rings when someone wants let in. Ours never rings unless it's Uber Eats. So my boyfriend was surprised when it started ringing late at night when neither of us had ordered anything. "Probably just some asshole playing a prank," I said, unhooking the phone from the wall and putting it in the kitchen cabinet. He accepted that without a struggle, and we laid down in bed. After he was soundly out, I got up, got dressed, grabbed a couple things, and headed downstairs in my thick winter coat. Sure enough, my fanboy was out there, in the parking lot. He waved at me and jogged over, smiling broadly. "Hey, man." "What do you want?" I said flatly. "Look, man, I feel like we ended things awkwardly last time, and I just wanted to talk to you," he said. "So you stalked me?" "What?" He started to look angrier, his brows furrowing. "Oh, man, I didn't stalk you. I just wanted to know when I could talk to you, but you always avoid me. Now you're walking around out here with that skinny little bitch boy trying to rub it in my face, and I don't fucking appreciate that." "Look, man," he said, smiling again, stepping closer. "You want to go talk about this back at my place? Ditch the white boy and come hang out with me tonight? Please? I won't shoot up or nothing this time." He took another step closer to me. I saw, in his right hand, a dully gleaming piece of metal, a folded up switchblade. He smiled at me and I stepped back, shaking my head. His smile drained away into a deep scowl. "Bitch, I'm done asking. You're gonna come over to my place now and finish what we started." He growled, unfolding the knife and pointing it at me. This dude was 5'8" tops, and skinny. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and regularly lift weights. Also, I had a 12-inch kitchen knife, which I drew from my coat pocket and leveled at his throat. He looked at my knife and then back at his and smiled again. Bro, I was just playing. We can just talk right here, bro. Leave me and my boyfriend alone," I said very quietly, "or I will cut your face off and eat it." "What the fuck?" "I spent 8 years in juvie for stabbing a kid in middle school." I lied. He backed up, putting the knife back in his pocket. I took a step closer, holding my knife level. He backed away quickly, almost falling on the ice until he was full sprinting back to his place, and I was chasing him down with my knife. Until he crossed the street and I stopped, slid the knife in my pocket, and watched him run back to his building. Then I went back up to my bedroom, told my boyfriend I'd just had to go pee, and fell asleep. When I was about 9 years old, female by the way, my family used to live in a remote area on the outskirts of town. Considering the location of the suburb, that area was surrounded by warehouses and such. At the time, my family did not have a phone in the house, and neither did our neighbors. There were no cell phones back then, or they were a luxury and not everyone could afford one. This took place in the end of the 90s. So, if I needed to call my mom while she was at work, I had to either go to my dad's work or a company next to his, which was closer to make a phone call. My dad's work was a relatively short walk from our house, probably 30 minutes or less. My dad was working at a huge unloading dock for metallurgical/natural resources shipments. In order to get to my dad's work, I had to walk past another adjacent company just like the one where my dad was working. I will call it Docks 2. My dad's work, as well as Docks 2, had a sort of watchtower. It's just a cabin mounted at the top of a tall platform, and you need to go up a decent amount of stairs to get to the top. There was always a guard inside overseeing the whole yard from the top, during the day and night to make sure no one is in danger, and that there's no break-ins. The phones were located only on-site watchtowers at the time. Docks 2 were much closer to our house, about a 10 minutes walk. One day, as I've done many times before, I went to the Docks 2 to make a call. I climbed the stairs, knocked on the door, and was welcomed in by a guard I used to see quite often and knew well. However, that day he wasn't alone. New guy, 28 at the time, was there. Apparently he was a new employee hired to work shifts. He was this very tanned white guy, always wearing military-style outfits. I was just an average-looking child looking exactly my age. My hair was very blonde, which made my cheeks always appear rosy red, and gave me even more childish appearance. When the new guy saw me that day, he wouldn't take his eyes off me. As soon as I was about to finish my call with my mom, it's just one room so everyone can hear my conversation with her, the new guy went outside to smoke. When I came out, he smiled at me and asked me what my name is and whether I came there often to make calls. I don't remember what I said, but I felt very shy because he was just staring deeply into my eyes. I will call him the Creep. Fast forward and I came to that tower again to make a call. And there he was again. But that time he was alone. I spoke to my mom, and as I was about to leave, he asked me if I wanted any tea too, which I refused. He then proceeded to ask me how my school was going and things like that. He offered to help me with my homework, however, I told him I've got it all sorted. Harmless, but strange. On a side note, I just want to say that what gave me shivers when I was near him is that whenever he looked at me, he looked drunk, which was very unsettling. Mind you, he wasn't actually drunk, but his eyes would get so hazy and his face would flush red. Sometime later, I saw him again. That time I was walking to my dad's work with my friend, and he was doing some digging in the docks too. When he saw me through the metal fence that was separating us, he just leaned against his shovel and just stared at me. He didn't say hi or anything like that. After those encounters, for quite some time I took alternative routes to see my dad, or play with my puppies at my dad's work, or make calls to my mom, because he really creeped me out. However, one day I had to call my mom urgently. My dad's work phone didn't work, so I had to go to the Docks 2 tower, hoping I won't see him. The creep was there, and oh boy was he so happy I came. He was complaining how I don't come anymore to see him. As I was making a call, he grabbed another chair and sat right next to me, very close. It took a while for the call because my mom was busy with something, and someone went to get her whilst I was on the line. I felt like hours waiting, and the creep was just sitting next to me, looking at me and smiling. When my mom finally got to the phone, he got up and went to make me tea and brought some biscuits. When I was done talking, he insisted I have tea with him. I didn't, and he just kept on trying to strike a conversation, but this time the tone of conversation was different. He asked me exactly how old I was, and I told him 12 or 13. I have no idea why I've lied that I was older than 9. He told me his age, and although I knew he was much older, I felt really weirded out that he wanted to talk to me so badly, or had any interest in being my friend. My alarms did go off every time I was around him, but I guess I didn't feel overly in danger. He then proceeded to tell me that I was beautiful, and asked me whether I had a boyfriend. He asked me if I have already dated boys and what type of boys I like. I was so uncomfortable and so eager to leave at that point, but he would just keep dragging me into these weird conversations. I could tell he was drinking that day. When I began moving towards the door, he followed me. Eventually, we were both outside. However, in order to get down from the tower, you need to walk this narrow path towards the stairs. He stood blocking it so that I couldn't leave. He got very close to me and I freaked out. The only escape tactic I could come up with as a child was to pretend that I'm seeing someone from the top of the tower. So I began waving my hand at the road down the bottom and towards houses in the distance, pretending I see someone I know and saying, "Oh look, that's my uncle. He's waving at me." The creep looked in that direction but either didn't care or could tell that I was lying. I kept on telling him that the uncle who waved back is a big, angry man, and if I won't come down this instant and go home, we both are going to be in trouble. The creep didn't budge. He got even closer and eventually pressed me against the railing. He kept on asking me his weird questions whilst I was terrified to move because I didn't want to move my body against his. If that makes any sense, so I just froze. He asked me if I would come on a date with him, and that he is looking for a girlfriend. And at that particular moment, someone was coming up the stairs to the tower, so he let me go, but asked me to come back. I have not told anyone about this encounter at that stage because I was afraid that my parents would get angry. I also felt very embarrassed and thought that people would judge me for what happened. Some time later I was home and it was around 9 p.m. I know the time because it was my bedtime. Suddenly a car came into our driveway. I came to see who it was through the front room window, and I could see it was a creep, but this time with other guys, blasting music in his car and shouting my name. I have no idea how he knew where I lived. He must have followed me one day. My dad was outraged. He asked me who these people were, but before I could even answer, he rushed outside. Apparently the creep asked for me to go out with him and his friends. My dad obviously refused, saying that I am a child and too young to hang out with them or go out at this time of the night, and that if he sees any one of them ever again, he will beat the living day out of them. So they drive away. I was so upset with my dad that he called me a child in front of them. Stupid. I think because we lived so far away from everything, I was really keen to make friends as there were no kids around and such. For a while after that, I hadn't seen the creep or heard of him. Significant time later, I was walking to my dad's work again and I've completely forgotten about the creep. He was working in the docks too with his friends. Maybe those that came with him that night in the car, or maybe they were just his co-workers. I got scared when I saw him and even thought he shouted hi. I pretended not to know him. He said something to his friends and I remember so clearly how one of his friends exclaimed loudly, "Her?" I guess he told them about me, or his interest in me, but no one expected me to be a child. I looked at the guy that exclaimed. He He was staring at me in utter disbelief. He must have been 20 to 25 or so, I think, and the creep was saying something to him. His friend screamed at him, "Have you lost your mind?" Clearly the creep didn't see me as a child like everyone else did. Fast forward again, maybe half a year later. One day I was home alone in the evening waiting for my parents to come back from work. We lived in a very safe community, so sometimes I'd be home myself for a little bit after school till my parents got home. I was playing a game whereby I was a singer. I had this stage created in the living room, and I was performing in front of chairs pretending chairs were my live audience. It was pitch black outside. At some point during my performance, I see someone staring at me through the living room window. That person must have been crouching down as only the top of the face could be seen from the bottom. As soon as that person realized I saw them, they run away. I was so embarrassed that someone saw me performing, scared and shocked at the same time that I was literally glued to the floor. I don't know whether that was him. Our dog didn't react at all. Maybe because music was playing very loud. I was scared to go outside the house to check, but peered through the window. However, no one was there. That person had to climb over a wooden fence to get to our living room window. I told my parents about it. I've also asked my friend whether it was him who came around, but he said it wasn't him. I don't know if my friend felt shy to admit he was watching me or whether it was the creep. To finish this up, one day I went to the docks too with my dad, as my dad needed something from there for work. I saw the old guard that I knew well and asked about the creep and was told that he doesn't work there anymore. I don't know what happened to him. I never told my parents about what happened. I was living in Abu Dhabi when this happened, and I was 17 years old at the time. I've had a number of experiences from taxi drivers out there that could fit on this sub, but this one was by far the worst and creepiest, and I'd like to share it with all of you. It was Boxing Day 2012, and I was going to my friend's house for his Boxing Day party. He lived in a compound that was a bit of a drive off the island itself, and although not rural suburbs by most standards, the area could be classed as such. These residential suburbs were also still mostly in development. Every block had a new building site, plenty of empty shells of houses, no security cameras at the time, etc. There were no pavements either, just rubble and sand patches split by tarmac roads. Now, taxis in the UAE are crazy common. You just put your hand out and one pulls up. And back then, there was less security. There were no cameras or mics in the car, just the meter. I hailed a cab and sat in the front, as a result of a past experience I had, and we set on our way. Things start normally. We talked as I normally would getting into a cab. How long have you lived here? Do you enjoy the place? Etc. Eventually we're on the highway, and after we cross the water to the mainland, he pulls over on the hard shoulder, and without saying a word to me, pulls out his phone and calls someone. He's speaking his native tongue, and he's of South Asian descent, so I have no clue what he's saying, but I ask him politely to continue driving as the meter is still on. He nods, hangs up, and gets going again. This happens a second time, again without word or warning. And now I'm suspicious. This time I ask him again to keep going, but he ignores me and keeps talking on the phone. We're on the highway, so I can't get out for fear of going splat, but not being able to hail a cab or being jacked for jaywalking. After a few minutes, he gets going again, and we pull off the highway, still heading the direction I needed to be. We reach the first roundabout where we need to make a right turn, but he goes straight over. Everyone knows where this compound is. It's the biggest one in the city, and as a cab driver, there's no way he doesn't know how to get there. So now I'm even more suspicious, and I kind of have a feeling of trepidation. Like I know this vibe and what might be happening. I ask him to turn around, at the next roundabout, but he ignores me. Now I'm getting agitated and angry, and I ask him to just stop the car and I'll get out and walk. Nope. He literally just ignores me and keeps focused on the road. At this point I'm shouting at him, numerous expletives, etc., and it's clear that he's got something else planned. Eventually he pulls off the main road into a dirt track that led a couple of 100 yards into a massive building site, and he keeps driving down it. He then turns to me and tells me to get into the back seat, and repeats this in an increasingly forceful manner at the points where we're shouting at each other. At the end of the dirt track is an old little minibus with roughly 5 dudes stood next to it. I didn't notice this immediately. All I care about is that the car has stopped, and I'm in the front so I can get out. I'm not locked in. Inexplicably, I threw some money at him, and jumped out of the car with my bag and started walking away, jogging back down the track. I can only imagine that the earlier phone calls he made were to these minibus men, as when I started getting away, they jump in the minibus and drive down to catch me, as the taxi turns around and does the same. They all pull up in front of me, like police do in the movies when they stop a bank robber and jump out. The taxi driver runs right up to me, grabs me, and screams point blank at my face to get in the bus. I can still smell and feel the damp heat from his breath as it touched my face, and the little bits of his spit hitting my cheeks. This honestly just enraged me, so I grabbed him by the throat and pushed him against his car. I screamed something back at him, I can't remember what, and let go. They all get their phones out and start calling and messaging and moving towards me, so I just got out of there as fast as I could, ran all the way down and back onto the main road, and went to my mates on foot. I know I should have taken the number plate, ID number, etc., called the police even when I was in the cab, let alone after it happened. However, I was a 17-year-old with a bottle of Jack Daniels in my bag, on the way to a party with all my mates drinking, in a Muslim country with a drinking age of 21. The paranoia of the trouble from that was enough to keep it quiet from the authorities, although I did tell every family member and friend. Bear with me, as I am not a storyteller. I will try to paint you a picture of the nightmare that unfolded. The story begins in the summer of 2015. I had been placed on a bed rest order and was awaiting surgery. Being unable to work, I googled options to make money from the comfort of my own bed. The easiest option was webcam service. I will admit, I should have done more research and protected myself better. I did not have the tools, nor understanding that the internet could be a very dark place. It started off simple enough. I had a desirable look, and before the days of OnlyFans, camming could be lucrative. Payment could be received through the website, or you could add a link to your Amazon wish list with the option of your private information withheld. I had made sure to the best of my ability to keep any information about myself protected. I used a fake name, I wore wigs and hair extensions, I used colored contacts, I made sure none of my surroundings had any personal indicators of my location. I changed my birthday and year on my profile. After a few days, my chat room had anywhere from 100 to 500 viewers with regular private chat customers and subscribers. After a few more days of exploring my surroundings and cruising the website, I learned that you could search for webcams in your state. Uncomfortable to think that someone I know could possibly stumble upon my cam. My mother and the family member I lived with at the time were aware of my internet business. After working the site for a month, and my surgery date fast approaching, I changed my personal info, availability, and added comfort items to my wish list, and placed a repeating banner in my chat room to refer to my Amazon list for wants and needs. A week before my procedure, around 1 a.m., I was sitting in bed. The lights on in my bedroom, and being on the second floor, I felt comfortable to keep my blinds and windows open for a nice summer breeze. I lived on a 60-mile-per-hour country road, a few acres between each house and a long driveway. Traffic would fly by, much too fast to get a clear look into my bedroom that directly faced the road. When I saw the car slowing down in front of my house, I thought it was someone looking for a house number on the mailbox. I watched the car creep by. I could see their taillights slowly moving through the tree line at the end of my driveway. And when I saw brake lights, something clicked. As the car started to slowly reverse back towards my house, I became more aware of my situation. My entire room, including myself, was fully illuminated and visible from the road. The rest of my house was completely dark. The car idled in the road at the end of my driveway for close to 5 minutes. Headlights on, moving forward then reverse every few minutes after that. I turned off the lights and sat in front of the window and watched for 20 minutes in silence until they left. 2 days before my procedure, my partner and I decided to go out for my last meal. Dinner ran late and I arrived home around 10 p.m. to change clothes before heading over to my partner's for an overnight. I lived with an older adult female family member. We chatted for a few minutes and I left in my partner's car within the hour. When I returned the following morning at 6 a.m., the door was deadbolt locked. I was surprised because we never double locked while I was sick in case of an emergency. After waking up the family member and being let in, she immediately asked where my keys were. Confused because I had my keys in hand, I asked what she meant. She told me around 1 a.m. she was woken by a loud slam on the glass storm door of our front door. She slept in the downstairs sunroom in the back side of the house. She said she waited a few minutes with her phone in hand to see if I would call to be let in, as she assumed I forgot my keys. After a few minutes of silence, she checked and saw no one outside. Checked the front door was locked, and then deadbolted it. Things were quiet for the next few days. My procedure was rescheduled due to an unforeseen complication. The next time I logged back into my chat room, I received a quickly repeated message through the public chat in a room with 150 people saying, "Hey, real first and last name. Your Amazon wishlist has your address listed publicly." Even with 2 additional chat room moderators with the ability to delete chat comments, block, ban, and report accounts simultaneously, the damage had already been seen and done. I opened Amazon immediately and deleted the entire account. I froze my cam account. I notified my family member I lived with about what happened, and told her that those 2 weird instances of creeps in the night could be very real threats. We were both aware. 2 weeks later, my family member went out of state for a week's vacation, and I prepared for my surgery now a few days away. I left the house around 2 p.m. with plans to return a few hours later. I shut off all the lights and wrangled my toddler child out of the house. When we returned around 8:45 p.m., the first thing I noticed while pulling into my driveway was one of the lights was on in the center of the downstairs. I remember thinking that's weird because I distinctly turned that light off before I left. I tried to rationalize toddler fingers are tricky, and they could have flicked it back on without me noticing. We walk in, front doors are still locked. Go straight into downstairs bathroom/laundry area, strip down and toss our clothes into the washer. Go straight upstairs into my room. I throw a t-shirt and undies on, then to my son's room to grab him clean undies. We go back downstairs, and as I'm turning on the kitchen lights, I see it. The back sliding door in the sunroom is open. It's not cracked open. It's about a foot-wide gap. The utter sinking feeling of my throat falling out of my asshole, and the sheer terror makes me nauseous to this day. In a split second, I scooped my child up and went out the front door so quietly and quickly, I'm still amazed, and ran to my car with my cell phone in one hand and child in the other, only to realize I had left my only set of car keys in the house. In an area with little to no cell service, I called 911. Told them there was someone in my home, and I was alone with child in my car and my keys were inside. I then called my mother, who was 25 minutes away, and then called my ex, who was 7 minutes away, and he flew over with his friend. My mother arrived and the police arrived 45 minutes after the call was placed. It was terrifying waiting in my car with my child with no protection, my keys inside and the complete darkness surrounding us. It was embarrassing when the police showed up and I was in underwear and a tiny white tee, braless and barefoot. The police searched the house 2 times over. They noticed the back door of the garage was broken. The garage door to the inside of the house was still locked. The sliding glass door handle had been jiggled in such a manner that the lock mechanism slipped out because the latch itself was still in the lock position. When they arrived at the house, the sliding glass door was shut almost all the way, with a 3-inch opening. Whoever was in the house remained hidden while I changed. They may have just been hiding. They may have been watching. There is no doubt that they were still waiting for me to arrive home. I have a long driveway that they would have seen me pull in, and they heard me messing around with my toddler while getting him out of the car, walking up the walkway, and then unlocking the front door and entering. That thought alone haunts me. No electronics were missing. No jewelry or valuables either. They asked me a lot of questions. Before they left, they suggested a home alarm system and adding new locks. They told me to look out for any missing personal items, like photos or clothing items. The layout of the property is also strange. We had a small backyard that sat on top of a hill that went down to water access, and the surrounding area was wetlands. The front of the house had motion sensor lights, so when they left, they stayed on the back side or far side of the house. They would have had to know the lay of the land, or take a serious chance running into swamp or falling down a steep hill into the woods. Also, with acres of land between houses, where was their car? Or did they have someone driving or waiting down the road? Let me share the story about the time my mother and I discovered a homeless man living in our cottage basement. This was in February of this year. We have a cottage about 45 minutes away from my parents' main home. It's not too far from Huntsville/Muskoka, Ontario, if anyone wants a visual. Thing is, it's completely unfinished. The basement has no proper flooring and has a slight water leak right now, so there are plenty of fans and a dehumidifier running. As a result, one of us needs to check on the place at least once every 2 to 3 weeks to empty the dehumidifier in the basement and make sure everything is okay. To describe the house layout a bit, the entrance to the basement is directly in front of the main entrance. It's a long, skinny staircase down with a low roof, so you need to crouch on the way down. There is one crappy light bulb in the ceiling, so it's always super dark down there. There's one big room, then 2 hallways branching off. One hallway leads to a bedroom, and the other leads to not only a second bedroom but also a washroom, all of which are completely unfinished and without lighting. The second hallway is much longer, and the rooms are just way off in the back corner of the basement and are completely dark. In other words, it's creepy looking. Okay, so let's get to the good part. The day it all went down. My mom and I are headed up there to empty the dehumidifier, have some lunch, and clean out some junk. We're slowly gutting the place. It had been nearly 3 weeks since we'd checked up on the place by this point. We stop at a McDonald's beforehand, and each get a filet-o-fish combo. First time trying one, and it was actually pretty tasty. We get into the place and put our food on the table, then turn the heat on. The first thing we do is run downstairs to turn the water on and check the dehumidifier. After turning on the water, we head over to the dehumidifier and notice that there is hardly any water in it. It looks like it's only been running for a couple of days. There is still the regular amount of moisture on the ground, but it was strangely empty. My mom and I head upstairs and she grabs her phone to text my dad and ask if he had stopped by to empty the dehumidifier recently. He said he hadn't. We were both puzzled as to why it looked so empty, but never considered there was a third person in the house with us. After heating up our food, we both sit down at the table and turn on the TV. About 5 minutes into our meal, we hear a massive bang downstairs, almost as if someone stubbed their toe really badly on a cupboard or something like that. We instantly jump and look at one another with a freaked out look on our faces. The TV is still playing rather quietly. Then we hear the worst thing. We hear a small grunt downstairs. It was unmistakably a human vocal sound. My mom whispers to me, "Was that a person?" And I smirk and nod my head yes. Although it was freaky at the moment, I wasn't really taking it very seriously for some reason. Looking back, this was pretty serious, and this person could have been very dangerous. I just told her, "Grab your jacket, and let's head to the car and call the police." We gather our stuff and I grab a kitchen knife on the way. If you'll recall, the entrance to the basement is directly across from the main entrance to the house, so I had to make this peek around the corner, and was fully expecting to see a person on the dark staircase, but luckily, it was just a series of stairs down into the dark abyss. Once we're out front, we jump in my car, and she calls the cops immediately. Within 3 minutes, 4 cruisers show up and 5 cops got out. We told them what had happened and they headed down the driveway. They were in the house for probably 10 minutes before the door opened. A couple of cops walked out and boom. A third cop brought out a short, chubby guy with long black hair and pop bottle glasses. They brought him out handcuffed onto the front steps, and another cop had a bag that looked like his belongings. We were in our car, which was up the street a bit and facing away from the entrance of the cottage. But my mom turned away as soon as he was brought up the driveway. She didn't want to get a good look at him, as the whole situation was pretty unsettling for her. They loaded him in the back of one of the cruisers and took him away. One cop came over and spoke with my mom for a bit about the situation. Ultimately, my parents had decided not to press charges against the guy when it was all said and done. He was probably sleeping on the cold cement ground with a small roll-out mattress, even though there was a proper bed upstairs. This made us think that he'd been down that back hallway in the unfinished bedroom for a while. We probably walked downstairs to empty the dehumidifier and turn on/off the hot water a number of times, and he was like 15 feet away in one of the bedrooms. He probably wasn't a bad person, and I'm personally at least a bit thankful he decided to empty the dehumidifier. Hopefully, he lived in there for most of the colder months this past winter. We're just lucky it didn't turn into one of those crazy squatting situations. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Sorry if it was kind of anticlimactic, but I think it fits in line with what this sub is all about. I'm new to sharing my weird happenings, but this is so recent that it still has me reeling. I want to scream, but I guess typing will just have to do. So, for some context, sometime in late 2019, I started seeing someone. We'll call him Shu. Shu seemed nice enough and was generally what appeared to be a somewhat normal guy. He kept insisting we move in together despite dating for only a few months, and the fact that I already own a house. That should have been enough to tell me to run, but no, I didn't. Shu started showing up at my house late at night without announcing himself or asking to be invited. At first, it wasn't too bad, but it became nightly. Then he started the lying for attention, even going as far as to claim a close friend had died. No, a close friend had not died. He'd show up drunk and demanding attention, and refuse to follow my house rules. If I did let him in, he'd refuse to leave. Long story short, Shu's behavior kept getting worse and worse, showing up drunk from being at the bars all night during COVID, demanding my attention despite knowing I'm high risk. He tried one last time to get into my home and I cut it off right there. Told him to leave me alone. The next morning I got a call at 5 a.m. to come into work on my day off. I was annoyed, but agreed. Then the call started, non-stop. I'd tell him to leave me alone and hang up again and again. When it was time to leave for work, I assumed it was my boss calling to tell me he was here to pick me up. It wasn't. It was Shu. Well, your boss is here for you. Click. Sure enough, 7 a.m. and he was camped out on the porch and tried to grab me in broad daylight in front of my boss. This kind of behavior went on for nearly a week. My employees refused to let me walk home after he started showing up at my place of work at closing time and would try to cut me off when trying to get into my house. Found out he kept calling because he could hear my phone ringing through the thin walls of my old home, trying to locate exactly where I was. Every day I'd have upwards of 20 phone calls and 50 text messages. I finally called the police after he threatened that I was too poor for a restraining order. The cop drew the line right there and took it as a direct threat to my well-being. When I got home that day, I noticed cigarette ash all over my porch and a hole burnt into my patio chair. Soon after, I found a window in the basement forced open with a surgical mask on the floor. I told my roommates and my neighbors what had been going on and gave a description of Shu and to be on the lookout. Things quieted down, and after a few months the phone calls from VPNs had finally stopped. I was in the car with my housemate earlier this week, and I mentioned a smudge of the garage door. He parks in front of the garage, not in it. When he told me, yeah, I think a homeless guy was squatting in there for a while. Probably weeks. I found a bunch of clothes in there and then they disappeared a couple weeks ago. My heart dropped into my stomach. I noticed tracks in the snow too big for my housemates to have left, but thought, no way, couldn't be. I was shoveling snow all through the night for my neighbors all winter, and he was literally within arm's reach of me, able to see directly into the windows of my house. And yes, I scolded my housemate. I get that he's a guy and doesn't really get it when a woman says, he's dangerous, call the cops if anything weird happens around the house, but come on, man.